Welcome, everyone, and pull up a seat at the table. It is lunchtime in Rome. Tonight is episode 164, entitled Injustice in Loss. Our guest tonight is Matt Cresto, a father and husband who recently went through one of the most excruciating and difficult things a person can go through. Watching his beloved bride, Christy, confined to a hospital bed, slowly pass away right in front of his eyes while simultaneously welcoming a new baby onto the planet. You can read his entire journey and all the horrific details he carefully documented during this process at fightforchristy.com. That's fightforchristy with a y.com. Now, disclaimer. There's some big hot button issues in this episode. Our sole intent is to hear Matt's story and discuss the deep well of hurts and emotions he experienced through this horrific process without pushing an agenda. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode belong solely to Matt and not necessarily to the Lunchtime in Rome podcast or any of our affiliates. So pull up a seat at the table and join us. First-time listeners, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Watch us live at lunchtimeinrome.com/live or listen directly on lunchtimeinrome.com. While there, you can take our relational needs questionnaire. Make sure to follow us on all social media, and it would be great if you gave us a 5-star review. Jay, what specifically is this podcast about?
Being alone is the worst. Good times aren't as good, and bad times are worse when you are all alone. Romans 12:15 says to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. That is how you keep people from being alone, and what this podcast is all about. We demonstrate that in the first 15 minutes of the podcast, and we talk about it for the rest. So while it may not be 12:15 in Rome, we're treating it like it is. Lunchtime in Rome.
So, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode.
It's a lot of bit of a different episode, and that is important.
Yeah, and normally what we do is we take the first 15 or so minutes and we talk about kind of our week and good, bad things and food sometimes and all of that.
We catch up on life. Share life with one another.
Yep, at the table. And
sometimes one life deserves to be heard a whole lot more than ours.
And that would be what's going to happen tonight. As mentioned in the opening, we have Matt Cresto on here. And I briefly described a little bit of what Matt went through and continues to go through to this day. But I wanted to give Matt the floor and kind of introduce himself. Before I do that, I do want to say that I met Matt earlier this year in January through a mutual friend. I went to his website and read through his story and started connecting with him over that. We met once for lunch at Panera, and I got to know him a little bit and just really feel the weight of the burden and hurt that he's going through, has gone through, and most likely in some ways will continue to go through. As I mentioned, he's a father. He has 4 kids, and so he's got his hands full, especially with one under 1 year old at this point in time. He's a hardworking guy who's done everything possible to hold it all together. And I was actually just having a conversation with a single mom today about just the juggling act that it is, you know, to keep up with your kid's schedule, to keep up with your own schedule, to bring in money, to do all of the things. Like, it's astounding what has to happen. And as we talk about on this podcast, having people surround you, being in community, not feeling alone is critically important. And so we may get into some of that with Matt tonight and how you've coped, who you've surrounded yourself with, and you know how that's allowed you to in some way, shape, or form make it through this time. As I mentioned, also, he's currently running fightforchristy.com, and again, that's Christy with a Y, where he honestly and thoroughly documented in great detail the horror show that was playing out right in front of his eyes in real time, and it's no stretch to call it a horror show. You've shared with me some of the pictures of, some of the things physically that were going on with Christy, and I mean, it's unbelievable. And so, with all that intro, Matt, would you please introduce yourself and give us your version, give us kind of a rundown of, it's all on your website. And again, everybody can go read it there. And I would highly encourage you to spend the 20 minutes or so, half an hour, whatever it is, reading through it on the website. But it would be so great, and we would be humbled to hear it right from your mouth.
Thank you. So I ended up getting COVID from work, and I brought it home. I didn't realize it was COVID. I thought it was a flu because I just had a slight fever and body aches. I've had it before, whatever.
Mhm.
I didn't think anything of it. Then she got sick, and she started having breathing problems. Some of her friends said, well, if she's having breathing problems, you should probably go to a hospital. So I figured, okay, what is one hospital in the Pittsburgh area that specializes in pregnant women?
Because she's 8 months pregnant at this point, or
36 weeks, yeah.
36 weeks.
Yeah, so she was 36 weeks pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone said McGee. So we took the trip down to McGee. And
That's where I was born.
Yeah, they immediately took her into the OB-ICU. And, of course, they did a COVID test, and she came up positive.
Mm-hmm.
And right away they, gave her some oxygen. And were asking her, they asked if she was vaccinated. Whatever. No. At the time, when she was pregnant, it wasn't something that was allowed. They didn't recommend it for pregnant women.
Mm-hmm.
So, they gave her some antibiotics, I think, or something. I can't remember exactly. But, they didn't really offer much in the way of treatment. I knew to ask about monoclonal antibodies and convalescent plasma, and they said, well, those don't work here.
Mm-hmm.
It's early in the podcast. I'm already mad.
Yeah.
Those don't work here. Oh, but in other places, great.
Yeah, they said they don't work, so we don't offer them.
Great.
Yeah. I'll touch on that again in a few minutes.
I apologize.
No, you're fine. So, her oxygen was in the lower 90s, and they were concerned about the baby, so they suggested to us delivering early. And we said, well, he's only 36 weeks. Like, is that safe?
Right.
Because 36 weeks is still considered premature.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, let's do an ultrasound just to make sure. Mind you, we had already had an ultrasound maybe a week before that. It was one of the 3D ultrasounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us pretty exact numbers as far as how far along he was. And they did their ultrasound, and they said, oh, well, he's actually 38 weeks, and he's 8 pounds 9 ounces.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, sure. All right, I don't believe you, but
they were telling you this in a way to maybe get you to go through with having the baby. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And they never really know. Like from my experience, all of my experience.
Right.
But they give you a range, and it's like 3 pounds. It's like there's a pretty wide margin for
right.
somebody.
It's not going to be 25.
Right.
So we talked about it with each other, and we said, well, what do you think? And one question we had for them was, knowing that she was COVID positive, if they were going to isolate him from us.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was already, obviously she was pregnant, and she had COVID, which means he was in there with it.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, are you going to take him away? And they said, oh, no, that's not our policy anymore. We don't take babies away from their mothers. As long as you wear a mask, you're fine. Okay, that was a little more reassuring.
Mm-hmm.
So we agreed.
This was a nurse that told you this at this point?
Yeah,
or
that was one of the nurses that told us it wasn't their policy to take them anymore.
Okay.
So we agreed, and it took a little bit, but they induced labor, broke her water, and then I can't remember what time. I think it was like maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, on the 10th.
So you had just been in the hospital for maybe how many, like a day at this point, or less than
just
a day?
Okay. Yeah, just a day at this point. They delivered him, and I took one look at him, and I looked at her, and I said, there's no way in the world that he's 38 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's definitely not an almost 9-pound baby.
Mm-hmm.
She got to hold him for about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I held him for about 5. And then they put him in that little bassinet-looking thing with the heat lamp.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 hours later, finally, someone from the pediatric staff came down to examine him.
Wow.
And they said, oh, yeah, he's 36 weeks, 6 pounds, 5 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly the numbers that we were given at our last ultrasound.
Yeah.
So now we're already pissed off because they overestimated on purpose.
Mm-hmm. And this, you definitely had that sense that that was a manipulation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I believe it was on the 12th, I think, they moved her up to the adult ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And we had still, had yet to see him at this point. They took him to the NICU for observation, and we still had yet to see him. And as soon as we got up there, my first question to, I think it was one of the male nurses, I said, when can we see our son? And he said, let me find out. 5 minutes later or so, he comes back and says, you can't see your son. I said, why not? And they said, because your wife's COVID positive. You can't be around him. I said, excuse me, that's not what we were told downstairs. Downstairs, they said, we don't take babies away anymore. And this nurse or doctor, whoever, said, well, I'm sorry, that's our policy. Like, that's, she's COVID positive. She can't be around him. I said, well, can I go down and see him at least? No, you can't. Why? Because you're around her, and you're now exposed, so you can't go see him for 14 days. I'm like, whoa, wait, 14 days? What do you mean I can't see my son for 14 days? Yeah, you've been around your wife. So you have to go home and isolate yourself for 14 days. And then you can come back and see your son. No. No.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving my wife's side.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I already had a bad taste in my mouth from this hospital at this point, and them telling me I would have to leave, no, not a chance.
Yeah, so this is about 2 days in. You've been there for about 2 days at this point. At this, two or three?
Like 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 3 days.
And you've held your son for 5 minutes, and your wife's held your son for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think it's important because I just checked, on your story. This is October of 21.
October 21.
This isn't April of 2020
Right.
when nobody knows what's going on.
This is not that long ago.
Right, but my point is it's also a year and a half into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we kind of know what's going on.
Right.
We know what it is.
Exactly my point. Like,
right.
Yeah. Yep.
So I told them, no, I'm not leaving. And magically 3 days later, they said, you can come pick up your son now. And I was like, what do you mean I can come pick him up? You just told me I had to quarantine away from him for 14 days. And they said, no, you had to quarantine from your wife. Okay, well, I'm still here. Why are you saying I can come pick him up now? It was dangerous for him to be around us then. Why is it not dangerous now? Well, you can't bring him upstairs. You have to leave.
So you leave your wife's side. The decision that they're giving is you leave your wife's side, get your son, and then you leave the hospital, and you can't come back for 14 days ish, whatever.
No, they just pretty much said he's good to go home.
Okay.
They didn't
even tell you
after
you
that.
can't come back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He's good to go. You can get rid of him now. So
Okay.
So you couldn't visit him in the hospital, but you can take him home.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the even funnier part was they let me go down to the NICU
Yeah.
to sit with him before his grandmother came to pick him up, because I wasn't going to have them possibly start something saying that, well, now I can't come back or whatever. So I stayed at the hospital. Her mother actually came to pick him up from the hospital, so she had a car seat in the car and everything, and she picked him up so that I could stay with my wife.
Wow.
But they let me go down to the NICU, even though 3 days prior that was
Right.
a huge no-no.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Down in the OB-ICU, I didn't wear a mask at all. My wife didn't wear a mask. It wasn't really a thing. But then as soon as they got up to the adult ICU, you had to wear the full gown, hairnet, mask, face shield, double glove, everything. Like, you had to do everything. I don't understand why, when they know that they had a COVID positive patient, why it mattered either way. If you're going to at least be consistent about it.
Sure. It's so heartbreaking. Like those moments, right after your child is born, like that, like those are bonding moments. You had 10 minutes. You had 5. Your wife had 10, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's,
Yeah.
That makes my stomach hurt.
I kept on asking when he would be allowed to come back to the hospital to see her, and they kept on giving me the runaround, giving me different dates, different time lengths.
Well, and you'd wanted to do breastfeeding and everything, and obviously
absolutely.
Your wife should be bonding with him.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
At first it was 14 days, then they said, 21 days, and then they said 21 days from a positive test, and then they went back and said, 20 days from start of symptoms. So they were all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, finally, they had given me a hard date when I could bring him in. And I didn't tell her because I'd already seen what, being isolated from her son had already done to her. And there were other things that happened, like when she was on the BiPAP mask, eventually she progressed from just oxygen to a BiPAP. And one of the respiratory therapists really did a bad job one day, and her oxygen tanked like the entire day. She was in the low 80s all day long.
Healthy oxygen's like 100%, and that, like, is that what the scale is? Just
below 95, that's when they consider it to be needing extra oxygen.
Okay.
And
so her oxygen went down into the 80s.
Yeah, low 80s. All because this girl left her mask real loose. It was leaking all over the place. And when they would switch her back and forth for meals, going between the mask and just the cannula in her nose, everyone else would turn the heater on so that it didn't freeze the inside of her nose. Well, this girl refused to do it.
Refused to do it?
Yeah, refused to do it. She said, that's not what we do. I said, everyone else, including your boss, has done this. You're going to do this. And she argued with me, and eventually I had to scream at her and tell her to get out.
My goodness. So wait, let me just again make the timeline. So your son's gone with your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And at this point it's just you and Christy, and she's starting to deteriorate a little bit. Now, I would imagine going into the hospital, you said we chose McGee because we thought if there's a place in Pittsburgh that's going to care for her, this would be the place to do it.
Right.
You're going in there with, all right, we're going to bang this thing out. We might be in and out in 3 days. And all of a sudden things start to really take a really bad turn.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Something I forgot was the evening that they told me that I couldn't see my son. One of the nurses came in at 9 o'clock and said, "You're going to have to go home now because visiting hours are over." And I said, "There's no way in hell I'm leaving. Like, you can't possibly do anything to make me leave." And she said, "Well, I'll go get the administrator on duty and they can explain to you why you have to leave." I said, "You go right ahead. Send them in." And I was expecting, an actual fight with administration. And this was probably the only good thing that the administration at that hospital did. The AOD walked in at around 9:45 and said, "So, are you all ready to go?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You have pillow, blankets, whatever you need." I was like, "This is a very different conversation than I was left with a little bit ago. So you're going to have to run that by me again." She said, "I'm not sending you home. I can't send you home. You're allowed to stay as long as you want." Like I said, that's probably about the only good thing that they did.
Yeah.
But even in that, the erosion of truth, because the truth is I have to go. Oh, the truth is I'm welcome to stay. The truth is I can have my kid. The truth is you can't have your kid.
Right.
There's nothing. And it's early in your story.
Yeah.
And I can trust nobody, and there is nothing that I can have any amount of peace in knowing.
Right.
And it's not like the stakes are small. These are huge stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ICU director, for whatever reason, actually, the ICU director was downstairs when my wife was delivering, and then also talked to us upstairs in her room. And even from the get-go, before we delivered, he was pushing for her to go on a ventilator. He said she needs to go on a ventilator. And
so very early on, they already kind of determined.
Like day one, right like that. She needs a ventilator.
And a ventilator really is like a last resort.
Yeah. Most people don't make it off.
And at that point, we've learned that
They're not the best.
They don't really work.
Right.
Yeah.
They work opposite.
Yeah. I can't even remember where I was now.
You were staying the night, and then the
Right.
director said they couldn't send you home.
Right. So we had talks with the ICU director, and he just kept on pushing the ventilator, and we kept on saying, "No, this is not what we want. She doesn't need a ventilator." Just I literally had to keep on saying, I want you to treat her symptoms, not what you think she has, but treat her symptoms. And I asked them about all kind of different treatments, and his answer every single time was, that won't cure COVID. Just everything was, that won't cure COVID.
A ventilator will. That was his fixated point, and the ventilator is going to cure COVID.
Right.
Okay.
They refused any kind of vitamin supplement.
They wouldn't give her vitamins.
They wouldn't give her anything. They wouldn't give her. I'm surprised they even let her eat. But they refused any kind of supplements. They refused. He didn't even want to give her an inhaler, and she was asthmatic. You have someone who has a lung problem that's also asthmatic, and you don't even want to give him an inhaler. Like, I'm no doctor, but I think it would make sense if someone who has asthma is having a problem breathing.
Right.
Uses an inhaler outside of the hospital.
Yes.
Well, in hospitals, I've gone to hospitals for breathing treatments when I cannot breathe because I used to have asthma. Maybe they should have given her a breathing treatment.
Well, I finally had to. I demanded to see a pulmonologist, and I had to demand it 3 times before they finally brought me.
That's
one.
a lung doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had to demand a consult with them 3 times. The first 2 times, the nurse said, well, this doctor is a pulmonologist. I said, no, he's the ICU director. I don't care what he is versed in. I don't care how well versed he is in that. That's not his title. I want to speak to a pulmonologist. So finally, they brought me a pulmonologist, and the pulmonologist said, well, yeah, you're right. Okay, she has asthma, so we'll give her breathing treatments. I don't see what the big deal is. So they started doing that.
And didn't at one point the ICU main guy that you're talking about say, well, the pulmonologist is my buddy. He's going to agree with me?
Yeah. He said that, well, the pulmonologist is my best friend. He's going to agree with me. Well, oops. I guess not.
Yeah.
And so, Matt, at this point in time, like, who are you talking to outside of the hospital? Like, what family, what friends? Like, you're a lone soldier inside, but is there anybody that you're talking to as this happens?
Yeah. Actually, her mother, who still works for UPMC, is a nurse at the hospital that she works at. And she kept on telling me, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right, and saying that her little podunk hospital would have taken better care of her. Even from early on, said none of this is right. They gave her monoclonal antibodies at her hospital.
When she had COVID.
Yeah, when she had COVID. And she had it back in May of 20. Or 21. Yeah.
Earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, May of the same year.
And so she was really instrumental in being there for you and helping you out in the process.
Yeah. Her and some of my other friends that were good friends with Christy. My one friend, Amy, she actually was feeding me a lot of research about different treatments and stuff. And, I mean, she found stuff that actually came off the NIH website, which NIH is who everyone bases their protocols off of, right? So I handed these studies to the doctors at McGee, and they said, that's not part of protocol. That's not going to work. It's not going to cure COVID. And I'm like, do you not see the letterhead at the top of it? Like, it's from the NIH. This is one of the people who you guys say that you base your decisions off of, and you're saying it's not going to work. I had studies on NAC, on ivermectin, on the monoclonal antibodies themselves, on high doses of zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, and you name it. I handed them, literally, I had the patient relations person, I had her print everything. So she saw everything. She handed them to me, and then I handed them to the doctors. None of the nurses that took care of Christy could believe that they were withholding any of this. Like, they all said, I don't understand. Like, yes, someone that's sick, they need vitamin D because we're up north. We're already deficient to begin with. And when you're sick and postpartum, you're really depleted of everything. They refused. They said no.
Talk a little bit about how Christy's doing at this point. Is she lucid? Is she able to, are you carrying conversations? And then where did that start to go south? I mean, you had mentioned the, her breathing, her numbers going way down. Talk a little bit about her and, how she was doing through all of this.
So before she ended up on the ventilator, because eventually they did force it on her, she had good days, she had bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And, she was carrying on full conversations. She had no problem.
Mm-hmm.
She was very vocal about how she felt,
mm-hmm.
rightfully so.
Yeah.
And she, for the most part, seemed to be improving. Like
mm-hmm.
her oxygen saturation was getting better, and once she got over the bad day with the one respiratory therapist, everything seemed okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing alarming. I ended up having to take two of the boys to a well check. So I had to leave the hospital overnight, and the next day after their appointment, well, actually the next evening after their appointment, I did a video chat with her. Mm-hmm. And even through the BiPAP mask, she was able to carry on a full-blown conversation. She was calm.
About when was this timeline?
October 25th.
Okay, so she went in early October, and then, so she's been in there the better part of a month at this point.
Right.
Okay.
So that was October 25th, and she said goodnight to the boys, goodnight to me. Like I said, we had a full blown conversation. Right. She wasn't sedated or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And before I left the hospital, I had talked to the nursing staff, and I said she has severe anxiety. Like, she already is freaking out that I'm leaving to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if she has an anxiety attack, give her something. Her milk supply is already dried up, so there's no chance of her giving any milk to her son anyways. So that's completely off the table. So if she gets in that situation, give her something to calm her down so that it doesn't make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And Christy agreed to it. Normally she would be opposed to it, but
mm-hmm.
she understood.
Because
and she
of the
agreed.
Circumstances, yeah. Right.
And I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning to a missed call from the hospital from 7:30, and I called back in, and they said, we had to ventilate your wife. And I said, why?
So you stepped out of the hospital
Yeah.
for the night.
Yeah. It ended up being 2 nights. I left so that I could be there to take the boys
mm-hmm.
to go to their appointment, and then that evening we still stayed at the house,
mm-hmm.
and then in the morning I was going back to the hospital. So they said, well, she had a bad panic attack, and she hyperventilated, and she went into hypoxia, and they said her oxygen dropped down into the 20% range.
Wow.
I said, well, how the hell did that happen? They said, well, around 7 o'clock in the morning she started to hyperventilate. And I said, so no one paid attention to the fact that she was having a panic attack? Okay.
Even though you had specifically said what
Yeah.
you said and instructed them to do what you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So they put her on a ventilator, fully sedated. Sedated and paralyzed. They gave her a paralytic so that she wouldn't try to breathe at all. The machine was doing all the work for her. And she was, face down, and I walk in the room, and there's my wife with a tube.
Face down?
Yeah, prone on her stomach.
Oh, okay.
And there's my wife with a tube hanging out of her throat out of her mouth, and I'm left with no one to talk to at that point.
Jeez. Yeah.
So I started basically questioning everything that they were doing, and they ended up leaving her on her stomach for 9 days straight. Now, to my understanding, that's like a huge no-no. You're supposed to, at the very least, reposition someone every 2 hours, if not flip them every 16.
Mm-hmm.
And they left her 9 days on her stomach. She ended up with a giant wound.
Sore.
Yeah. This is one of the pictures you showed me. Yeah.
Yeah, she ended up with a giant wound underneath her breasts, right across the rib cage, where it was so deep, it was pretty much down to bone.
Yeah.
There was no flesh left on top of it.
Jeez.
It was horrific. It was disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. And her mother is a board certified wound care nurse to boot.
Yeah.
So I sent her pictures, and she's like, "What the hell happened?" And I told her they finally flipped her over, and that's when she started freaking out. Like, you're supposed to flip every 16 hours, not every 9 days. And they attributed it to her not tolerating it, but I don't buy it.
Yeah. Now, during those 9 days, you would continue to go, but like you were at this point back in the hospital with her and by her side and everything.
I didn't leave.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even leave for food. I would either call for hospital food downstairs, or I would use DoorDash.
Mm-hmm.
I literally didn't leave the room.
Yeah.
And so if they said she didn't tolerate it, you were there.
Well, they had me step out because they said it's not a pleasing
anything
sight.
you want. Right, I get it.
Whenever they have to flip someone,
Sure.
they said it's not very pretty.
Right.
Because they have to be a little physical.
Yeah.
Because you have, my wife was not a small person. She was
Right.
all better of probably 260, 270.
Right.
So it took some muscle.
Right. So you
To
were
get her flipped
excused
over.
so they could say, "Oh, yeah, she didn't tolerate it."
Pretty much.
Of course, they didn't tell you that then either. Each time, or did they?
No, they every time that they tried to flip her, which wasn't that often. They only tried like 2 or 3 times before they finally
In
got
9
her flipped.
days.
Yeah, in 9
Right.
days.
Mm.
When they finally got her flipped, her face was swollen to the point where it looked like someone had put golf balls above her eyeballs.
Jeez.
Because all the blood's just rushing into the front of your
Well,
body.
she wasn't face down and like this. She was relatively level. In fact, even slightly inclined.
Yeah, but still.
But it's just all that fluid just drains into
Yeah, but I
into
mean,
the front
gravity.
of your face.
You're laying down on your whatever position you're in. You're down that way for 9 days.
Yeah.
That's where all the blood's going to pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And eventually the swelling went down. Whatever. Again, she had good days, bad days. Her oxygen saturation would, fluctuate from day to day. There were some days where she was all the way up to like 98, 99%. And they started trying to they said that they were backing down the amount of oxygen that they give her instead of the pressure that they give her.
Through the ventilator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I would think that you would want it the other way around, but they thought differently. It was early November at this point that I decided I was going to make the website Fight for Christy. And I literally did everything. I registered a business, created the entire website, all from the hospital room. And that's when I started doing daily updates and stuff. And she eventually got to the point where she was starting to wake up a little bit. They were turning down some of the sedation. The first thing you notice when someone's coming out is their eyebrows will start to twitch, and then maybe their eyelids a little bit. And it progressed to not just that, but then she could also move her head around. She could open her eyes easily. She was able to respond to yes/no answers. Like, she could shake her head yes or no. Eventually, her fingers and arms started to be able to move again, and she could point to things. So at this point, I was like, this is great. This is a major improvement. She's starting to come out of it.
Yeah.
We might be through the woods on this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it got towards the end of November, and yeah.
So you...
Because that's like a month at that point. It's a whole month at that point.
It's almost month and a half.
Almost
2 months, yeah.
And you've missed Halloween. She's missed Halloween. She's missed Thanksgiving. So
yeah. So right around Thanksgiving time, that's when she really started to show improvements. And surprisingly, she was tolerating the tube in her mouth very well, because that's not something she would normally be able to. But it was Thanksgiving time. I spent Thanksgiving at the hospital with her. And then the next day, before I get to that, I should backtrack a little bit. One of the nurses knew about the website. This is one of the good nurses.
Mm-hmm.
Knew about the website and was talking to me about it and stuff, and informed me that the unit director, not the ICU director, but basically the head nurse, caught wind of the website and sent out a mass email to the entire ICU staff. The entire ICU staff, including people who had nothing to do with her care. Saying that, the hospital is aware of it. Don't comment on it. Don't share it. Don't talk about it with me or anyone else. Basically completely ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. And once I knew that they knew, and I figured that they probably didn't know that they knew, I figured they'd be on their best behavior because they know I'm watching them, because I detail every single thing that happens.
Yes, you should at this point, especially.
Yeah.
I figured that they would be on their best behavior, that we're out of the woods, she can come home soonish,
Right.
and no one's going to screw up. Last time I ever make that mistake. So Black Friday, I talked to Christy and I said, I'm going to go up to your mom's house, and she wants me to come up for Thanksgiving, so we'll have a late Thanksgiving. You're going to be okay. They know that I'm watching them. You're safe. Everything is going to be fine. So I left, and I took the opportunity, since I was up there for the weekend, to go hunting, because right after Black Friday, that's season opener for deer season.
Right.
I was out in the woods on Sunday, and I decided to call into the hospital. I'd called in on Saturday too, just to see how everything was going. They didn't really update me much. They didn't have much to say. So I called in on Sunday at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I said, I just want to see how my wife's doing. Can I talk to the nurse? And she put me on hold for a second, came back and said, nurse is busy right now. She'll call you back later. She's with another patient. Okay. All right. That's fine. A few hours go by, and I hadn't heard anything. Well, her mom actually calls me and says, hey, I got a missed call from the hospital. Maybe you should call them. And I looked at my phone. And I'm like, I don't have a missed call. Why'd they call her?
Right.
So I call back in, and she puts a nurse on the phone, and the nurse says, oh, she had a pneumothorax. She blew a hole in her lung. I was like, that's not good, right? No, not really. Should I be coming back now? Like, do I need to stop what I'm doing and leave? No, just hang tight. We'll let you know how things go. Okay. So now I'm concerned.
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours later, I get another phone call from the hospital, and they said, you need to come back now. And I was like, okay, why? And they said, your wife coded for 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? And I wasn't in the state of mind to drive myself there, so
Sure.
her sister brought me down to the hospital. God bless her, because she hates Pittsburgh and can't drive in on highways or city traffic, but she made it there. We made it alive. So I get there, and I walk in the room, and the look on my wife's face is just somewhere between terror and sheer pain. And I didn't understand why at first. But a little bit later, I found out that they had shut everything off on her. Everything except for the ventilator. So the only thing that was still running was the ventilator. All sedation was turned off. All pain management was turned off. Everything was turned off.
Wow.
So she was lying there fully awake, fully aware, with a tube in the side of her chest, after having been dead for 15 minutes. And I lost my cool. I couldn't hold it anymore.
Yeah.
I started screaming at anyone that was in the room. And I called them out on knowing about the website. And I said, you guys care more about watching my stupid website than you do about watching my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I was able to get them to turn stuff back on so that she would at least not be
In pain. Yeah.
Agony, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
And so then after that, her kidneys started failing, her liver started failing. Up until this point, she had been holding a pretty steady fever.
Mm-hmm.
Usually around like 103, I believe. Around 103. It reached into 104 a couple times. And it went from being a fever to hypothermia. Her body was shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't remember much between then and the end, but it was all just a blur at that point.
Yeah.
I watched my wife's heart go from 140 beats per minute average down to 18 slowly.
Wow.
Took hours.
Wow.
Her blood pressure kept on dropping. They gave her everything they possibly could to keep her blood pressure up.
Mm-hmm.
So then we ended up watching her die.
And that's how long after the Saturday or Sunday after Thanksgiving?
Only a couple days.
A couple days.
It was into December, right? Like that
December 1st,
she
yeah.
died December 1st. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she went in beginning of October, died December 1st. And at one point, I think I remember reading in your story, you had said that you had overheard the, the ICU doctor, whatever you said, that main doctor, call her his test patient, her test subject.
Yeah, he called her case study. He called her his case study. I didn't catch it, but she did, and she said, "I'm not a lab rat."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder what case study, what was he studying, and it doesn't. I mean, obviously, that's terrible to hear. I can't imagine how terrified that would have made her.
Yeah.
Lying there, and at this point, she had the ventilator in, or was this pre-ventilator when she heard that?
She heard that before the ventilator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was like
ventilator.
That was like after the first day or two that she was upstairs in the adult ICU. We had tried to see about getting her transferred out because one of the things that they said she may qualify for was ECMO. Basically, it's kind of like dialysis, but for the lungs. Mm-hmm. It oxygenates the blood for you so that your lungs don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Which we were okay with that idea because at that point she was already ventilated. And they were going to transfer her to Presby, which is literally a stone's throw from McGee.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that she didn't qualify because she was too big. Whatever. Okay. So I had talked to them about trying to transfer her out to another hospital just to see if maybe she could get better care somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, she's my wife. I want the best I possibly can get her.
Right.
And they said, well, she's too sick to leave. You can't take her anywhere. And then finally, when I raised enough stink about not liking the ICU director and not agreeing with how he was handling her case, they actually cornered us in it was myself, her sister, and her mother. They cornered us in what was supposed to be a family meeting and basically said, he is the ICU director and you will deal with him. We've requested other doctors. Like we wanted a second opinion. They said, no.
You're looking for all your options.
Yeah.
Right.
They said, he is the ICU director. There's no one else.
Mm-hmm.
You either deal with him or you get out. And I said, but you just told me a little bit ago that we can't transfer her out. She won't make the trip.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can transfer her out. That's fine. But you have to find your own bed somewhere else.
What?
Oh, so you won't even help us with the transfer? No, you have to find your own bed. You have to call hospitals and find your own bed. And then you have to arrange the transport. And I said, okay, well, what about Presby right up the street? Oh, no, you can't take her to any other UPMC facility. You have to take her outside of UPMC. So you're telling me that the place that was going to be okay for her to go to for this ECMO, we can't even take her to. Well, no. If you want to leave UPMC, you have to leave all UPMC.
Wow.
And I wish I wouldn't have asked prior to having the conversation. I was going to record it because I knew where things were headed.
Yeah.
And I asked them if they'd be okay with it. I inferred that they shouldn't have a problem with me recording it.
Yeah.
And they said no.
Right.
So then I couldn't. But, yeah, just there, so many things went wrong in that hospital. And I just really hope no one else ever has to go through it.
Yeah.
So, obviously, there's a problem with protocol or communication.
Oh, yeah.
How do you fix a system like that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just my opinion, but protocols don't work. They're killing people. They're not helping anybody. I mean, the stats prove that if you go to a hospital with COVID and they put you on a ventilator, you have a better chance of making it out alive by not going there than you do being on a ventilator.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people that I've talked to, I can't remember what hospital she works at, but she's a nurse, and she said that out of the 10 cases that she could think of right off the top of her head where someone was on a ventilator with COVID, only one person survived.
Wow. And that's an anecdotal story, but that's one person's story firsthand.
Yeah. You know, doctors refusing things that are known to help. Even just normal, like
vitamins.
Normal vitamin supplements, refusing it. It's like you have someone who's sick. Someone who's sick, their immune system is already weakened and already depleted, and you should be trying to help that, not hurt it.
Right.
And I've heard stories, and I gotta say, my wife's story, as tragic as it is and as horrible as it is, I keep on hearing stories about like how they don't give people any nutrition. They won't even give them food and water. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I jumped on your website today after probably a couple months. You know, you and I kind of lost touch for a little bit, or didn't touch base for a little bit. But I jumped onto your website again yesterday, and I saw that you have quite a few other stories. Like, it seems like you're compiling stories, and I think that that's probably something that is very vital right now, is to get these stories out there as much as possible.
Right.
I want to shift gears for a second, because I want to talk about contradictions, and not necessarily in your story per se, but in your circumstances, in your emotions. You are filled with joy and expectation over a new baby, and then watching your bride get sick and admitted to the hospital. Can you talk a little bit about, as you're going in, the baby's, it's about a month away, but, talk about what you guys were doing up to that point before she got sick, and then talk about, the contradictions that you have in that, because that's two very, separate sides of life.
Right. So my wife, she had gone through obviously 4 deliveries before that. And the one thing she wanted to do this time, she wanted to do a home delivery.
Okay.
So we had a midwife, and things were going great. Everything was fine, normal. Everybody was healthy, and we were just getting the house ready for, a new baby, and getting our room set up so that she could have the home delivery. And that's, basically when everything kind of got turned upside down.
Wow. And so you go from that, you go through the most horrifically disorienting, dizzying, enraging, and then at times, I'm sure, numbing ordeal, leaving you in places you never thought you would be, in a place you never thought you would be, losing your wife. Help me understand at this point, from that point on, where do you go emotionally? Because you go from, I mean, there's all the stages of grief, and we get that and everything else. But what I mean is, where do you go as far as like, you know, you said earlier your mother-in-law was there for you, your sister-in-law was there for you. Where have you gone? Like, how have you been able to live? You know, I when I met you tonight, I said I greet you with great respect,
Right.
because this breaks people.
Yeah.
Tragedy makes you more of what you are, and so you're obviously a strong man. How have you gotten from that point to this point?
My kids. That's about it.
Yeah.
Go on about that.
So, the moment that her heart stopped beating, I was filled with unimaginable rage.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much dead set on getting revenge some way, somehow.
Right.
But then I look at my kids and I'm like, I can't.
Right.
I got 4 kids I got to take care of. I can't leave them stranded. So my kids are pretty much the only thing keeping me level-headed.
And how has it gone taking care of them?
They grow up fast.
What are the ages?
So her younger daughter, Emma, is 11. She's going to be 12 this year. Colin is 5. Carter, who actually now shares a birthday with his youngest brother, is going to be 3 this year. And obviously Caleb is still less than 1.
Man. And that is, do you have help?
Yeah, my parents help out a lot. I've had some friends come over and watch the kids so I can take care of some things here and there.
Because, I mean, you're working again, right?
Yeah, I am. I took, including the 2 months that I was in the hospital with her, I took about 5 months off of work, and I still had a job when I was ready to go back.
And and they gave you, they kept your job for you?
Yeah, yeah, they did.
I mean, it'd be a pretty crap move not to.
Well, I mean,
It would be another website.
But right.
I mean, towards the end, they were starting to question if I was actually going to come back or not, and at that point, I pretty much was faced with the decision. You know, do I go back to work, or am I leaving my job and searching for new work elsewhere?
Right.
Because after my wife passed away, I spent, up until the point where I went back to work, I spent all that time actually up with her mother, with my mother-in-law. And
she lives about 2 hours away, something like that.
yeah, she's up towards Clarion. So I got to spend some time just dealing. A lot of woods out there. I think part of what helped is she actually has a wood burning furnace, and
There's a whole lot less trees up there now, aren't there?
I didn't cut down any that weren't already dead. But I had the opportunity to go out and just, escape.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you come back. Have you had the opportunity? I mean, I know the website is incredible, and it makes me even sadder seeing all the other stories. And we know there's a million stories out there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the centralization of medicine is to no one's benefit,
Right.
other than those who
People
centralize
making
it.
money.
Right.
Right.
But you've kept busy. You got it out. You go through this process of you want to provide for your kids the greatest semblance of normalcy.
Yeah.
Because life is never going to be the same. And I shared with you just briefly, my story. And once we knew that my youngest son his cancer was terminal, I was like, okay, I have to do everything I can to make sure that it doesn't ruin 3 lives.
Right.
They've ruined, 1.5 lives. You can't let them ruin 5.5 or 6. How has it gone getting back? And then, so you search for a new for normalcy, but there is no more normalcy.
Right.
And we're not going to say new normal because that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a new reality. How has that process been, and how aggressively have you done anything with your kids, like the Caring Place? Do you know about the Caring Place for grief. It's run by Highmark, which it's a bonus. It's not a UPMC facility.
No.
But it's just a place where both adults and children who have experienced loss can go. They can go and get to work things out.
Right.
How's it been just to establish? I mean, because you're...
Well, unfortunately, because of work, I haven't been able to do things outside of just normal everyday
right,
stuff.
I'm just getting by.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to get back to church yet, which I need to do.
Depends on the church.
Cornerstone.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a good church. I'll give you a thumbs up on that.
All right. Yeah, just...
So you're just hitting the ground, just doing what you can.
Yeah.
Right. And how has, in this time period, obviously you've had some people really come alongside you, but you are now, 7 months removed, right?
Yeah.
7-8 months. It's important because it sort of gets to a point where, like, the phrase I use is the lasagna stop coming. That in the first few days, everybody's there. And then you get to a point and it's like, they're not there as much, and people move on. Do you still have that support around you? Is it immediately family? Do you have those friends? Do you have enough to get by?
I do.
To get to that, because that's essential. That's when people feel most alone.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the phone calls stop. They don't want to bring it up. They start asking, well, you should be better by now. I'm like, when is that? You're never better. But that's great that there's at least those people to still be there for you and help with the driving and the because I'm sure you're taking kids everywhere.
Well, actually, so when I'm at work, my parents are watching my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So when Christy and I first got together, and we ended up getting pregnant with Colin, our first one together, she was working, I was working, and I looked at her and I said, what are we going to do here? Because we can't both work. So you got two options, really. I said, you can either A, continue to work, and I continue to work, and all of your paycheck and then some goes to paying for daycare.
Right.
Or B, you just stay home and you get to raise your kids. She saw that as a perfect opportunity because that's what she wanted. She wanted to be able to raise her kids.
Yeah.
She didn't want a daycare or a babysitter doing it for her. So I said, okay, that's what we'll do. You stay home, I keep working. And that was my mission. That was my job in life. She was supposed to raise the kids. I was supposed to work and make sure bills get paid, roof over her head, and food on the table. And then someone screwed that up.
Yeah. Badly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. The dad you are, the husband you are, is impressive. And how hard you fought and how hard you're fighting is commendable. And yet, giving your kids a sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And tying in your parents and of course, her mom is so vital for their health moving forward. Because, will they be the same? No. But they can be okay.
Yeah.
They can be different, but they can be okay.
I guess it's kind of a little bit of a twisted way to look at it, but Caleb and Carter, the two youngest, they're never going to remember.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Colin may have some slight memories.
Right.
The ones that are going to take it the hardest are myself and Emma.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a journey ahead, but it's doable.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I love to encourage people is, in your darkest moments, it is possible to heal and to move on.
Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, actually, so in my quest to bring out truth and share other people's stories, I was actually approached by another group. They're called Former Feds Group, and they do pretty much the exact same thing. They gather stories, share them, put them out there.
Federal, because you'd explained it before podcast. Federal agents or federal attorneys.
Former feds is exactly what they are. It's former federal prosecutors, attorneys, stuff like that.
Okay.
But it's not just that. we have and I say we because I joined with them. We have a civilian task force, and we do a lot of work with victim support, victim outreach. We're constantly searching for attorneys that will help in different states to bring those responsible to justice, really. Because right now, with all the blanket coverage that all the hospitals have, the immunity that they have, it's quite a battle.
Yeah.
And we're trying to gather as much information and as many stories as we can, bring everyone together, because once you have a large enough mass of people, you can't ignore it.
Right.
It's no longer, oh, well, it's just circumstance, or it's dumb
A
luck.
one-off. Yeah.
There's diehard proof of what's going on.
And that the problems are systemic.
Yes.
Not outliers.
Right.
Well, do they have? Is there a website that you want to promote with that? I mean, because obviously you have your Fight for Christy with a Y.com. Does this organization have anything that you want to shed a light on as far as like people can go check them out?
Yeah. Well, if anyone has a story similar, or even anything involving anything with all this crap that's going on, you're not alone. Reach out.
Yeah.
Their website is formerfedsgroup.org. You can also find them on chbmp.org. That's a kind of like a sister website that we've put together so that other people can pretty much do the same thing. They can bring their own stories in. They can interview other people as well,
And again, I mentioned that you have been putting stuff on your website. I mean, are you welcoming people to contact you as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because we've seen there's always been injustice in the world, but the past 2 years, it seems like everybody that's rotten has got away with it. And there's so many people in those positions that are just hoping it all goes away. As more and more things become clear, they're hoping that we move on to other things. And for them, that might be an option. For them, it might just be, okay, that's in the rearview mirror. But for people like yourself, this is now your life that they have altered forever.
Oh, yeah.
And there has to be accountability for that.
There is one more thing I want to touch on, because we did have Matt take the relational needs questionnaire.
Yeah.
And do you mind if we talk about that real quick, Matt?
Sure.
So Matt's highest needs are affection, appreciation, and encouragement. And I think what's really heartbreaking to me is that like you've lost your one source of affection, your wife, and that's like one of your highest needs. Like that is incredible to me. Like, and I know we're a podcast about emotional needs, and I just want to recognize that. And that's just incredibly heartbreaking to me. And I know like you can get affection from high fives and fist bumps with buddies and hugs with your kids and stuff, but man, losing your wife, gosh, I can't even imagine that. But I appreciate you being here, and that's one of your highest needs. I want you to know that I appreciate you being here and doing this so much, and I also encourage you to keep going and keep fighting. And if you ever need us for anything, please let us know, and we can promote whatever you need.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I've said it all. I mean, you have all my respect in the world, and I look forward to what God does through you, and literally the lives that are saved. And I encourage you, never quit. And I know you're not going to. You don't need me to tell you that at all. But man, my heart goes out to you, and I'm a different man having met you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to take the time to just thank you for making the trip over here. I mean, you're coming from export, but it's not super far, but taking the time out of everything else that's going on for continuing to dialogue with me, to be open. We talk about being open, honest, and vulnerable. And this is incredibly open, honest, and vulnerable. So thank you for that. And that's going to wrap it up for episode 164. Please make sure to give us a like or follow on social media and visit us at lunchtimeinrome.com. While there, you too can take our relational needs questionnaire. Thanks for joining us at the table for Lunchtime in Rome. Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.